From the PEP Radio Newsroom, I'm David Moore with this evening's LGBTQIA+ news. The state of Kansas will pay $50,000 to settle a federal anti-discrimination lawsuit filed by a former state highway patrol employee who claimed to have been fired for coming out as transgender. The ex-employee was a buildings and grounds manager in the patrol's Topeka headquarters and sued after being fired in June of 2022. The patrol said the ex-employee had been accused of sexual harassment and wasn't cooperative enough with an internal investigation. The lawsuit alleged that reason was a pretext for terminating a transgender worker. The settlement came 4 months after U.S. District Judge John Brooms rejected the state's request to dismiss the lawsuit before a trial. Brooms ruled that there are genuine issues of material fact for a jury to settle. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2020 that a landmark 1964 federal civil rights case barring sex discrimination in employment also bars anti-LGBTQ+ bias. In other news, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing the Biden administration on two key LGBTQ+ issues. A federal judge handed Texas a win in a lawsuit that it filed to block a Biden administration Title IX rule change from going into effect. The rule redefined an anti-discrimination provision to replace biological sex with sexual orientation or gender identity. It would have forced our schools to accommodate biological men on women's sports teams and in female bathrooms, showers, and locker rooms, and required students and teachers to use incorrect pronouns, said Paxton. On Thursday, Paxton sued the Biden administration over another federal rule change, forcing private businesses and state governments to implement transgender policies. He first sued over the same issue in April, which was, at the time, his 75th lawsuit against the Biden administration. The defendants are slightly different in the cases, and the Heritage Foundation joined as a co-plaintiff in the second lawsuit. At issue is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission guidance that rewrote Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by broadening the definition of discrimination. It requires employees to use others' preferred pronouns, allow transgender individuals to use the shower, locker room, or restroom that corresponds to their gender identity, and allow employees to adhere to the dress code that applies to the opposite biological sex. Paxton argues the guidance is unlawful and increased the scope of liability for all employers, including the state of Texas, which employed roughly 140,000 people in September 2022, according to the state's comptroller's office. It also opens the door for employers to be sued that don't use so-called preferred pronouns, allow biological males into women's facilities, or abolish sex-specific workplace dress codes, again, according to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The lawsuits were filed in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas, the Amarillo Division, the same court where Paxton filed a lawsuit 3 years ago to block similar EEOC guidance. In 2021, the court ruled that the EEOC lacked any authority to reinterpret the law and issue any mandates based on that faulty interpretation. It also ruled the guidance was unlawful because Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 does not require employers to provide accommodations to employees based on their perceived gender identities. The EEOC and the U.S. Attorney General's office did not appeal the court's ruling. In Meadville news, Mayor Jamie Kinder announced that the City Council will vote to limit the number of games of skill within the city of Meadville. After talking with residents and businesses, she said most people were concerned about places that don't offer anything else within their businesses other than the opportunity to gamble at skill games. The mayor said, quote, "That is so it does not take up business space. We are not a very big city, so we wanted to make sure that we are making room for businesses that are bringing people in, that have employees that are bringing value to our downtown," end quote. The vote doesn't mean that more games of skill will not be allowed to come into the city, but rather when they help the city or not. Skill game centers must go through the zoning process before they can be approved within the city limits of Meadville. The weather forecast from the National Weather Service for Meadville this evening is calling for thunderstorms early, then cloudy skies overnight. We might still see a sprinkle or two with a low of 68 degrees. For Saturday, cloudy skies in the morning will lead to afternoon thunderstorms. It is possible that the storms will contain strong gusty winds. Tomorrow's high is 82 degrees. And for tomorrow evening, scattered thunderstorms in the evening with strong gusts of wind will give way to cloudy skies, low 66 degrees. That's the news and weather from Pep Radio News. Now let's get back to the music.